It's very good to be with all of you today. And as we begin this, I want to thank you very much for joining in. As I look and see your faces, I know there are some very significant stories that you come with as you're in this session today. Some of you have been a part of this for a very, very long time. And as we begin to look at all of these years that collectively folks on this call have contributed, it's really quite awesome. This morning I was just looking at 4 people who happen to be on this call, and they've been working with the principals, just the 4 people, for 140 years combined. That's quite a magnificent contribution. And as I started to do my learning of the principles way back for me, it was about half of the way for some of the people that are on this call today. So we have some real veterans in the group. And I'll ask you to please share your experiences and stories. This is more than anything a time for conversation, for sharing. When so much is unfolding and happening with the principles globally and especially on the internet. Judy, we enjoyed following everything with you and your trip to Ireland and the wonderful reception that just happened. It was totally delightful. Barb, I see you sitting there, and I think marvelous at this point. 1 book already out in the last couple of years, hopefully another coming. And I can just take you picture by picture. There sits Diane with her absolutely wonderful contributions in the social services profession, teaching professionals. So it's an exciting thing to be together. And as I began to think about this session today, it came into my mind that maybe what was the right topic for this time is to simply look at this notion of state of service. And it really took me back to the first days of my introduction to the principles. And it reminded me of the long legacy of people who were teaching and contributing well before I came on the scene in the early 90s. And the story that came to mind first for me was how in about 91, as I was beginning to hear about what then was called health realization in my area, what happened as I made the first initial contacts with Roger Mills. And he was so generous. Here I was, an unknown from Minnesota. Bonnie Bernard had persuaded me to go out to California and sit in on a session of his at a professional conference where he was just doing a small workshop. And at that conference, I was very sure, and so was Bonnie, that what he was speaking about was relevant for our work in what at that time was basically youth prevention at the community level. Some of you in this call today are still deeply involved with that. Bonnie, Gary, Mary, others on the call today. And Amy sometimes laughs about her father giving away her inheritance. And what she was really meaning, I think, when she said that to me jokingly, was that Roger was so prone to create opportunities for people to learn that sometimes he didn't think about what the financial consequences for him really were. And what happened for me is that he extended an invitation just at the end of that conference when I was just thanking him for the session and saying, I wish there was a way I could know more. He said, well, why don't you and your husband fly out to California and you can be part of our training? And it was in the next month. Something that happened out at San Jose. And obviously, people that we know today as real leaders were in the beginning stages of beginning to teach the principles. And I'll never forget sitting in that session, and Roger was doing the very simple little lesson about read 2 paragraphs about listening in neutral out of one of his handbooks. And as I did that, just those 2 paragraphs had a powerful effect, and it was enough to draw me to the next and the next and the next learning opportunity. But if he had not extended that opportunity to just come and be part of it, I'm not sure where I would have ended up. And then I began to think about all of the opportunities that each one of us have experienced and how that has contributed to what I consider the global explosion of the interest and dissemination of the principles today in all of the ways that collectively we know about. And I began to think that it was important to identify a little bit of that, because I think that state of service, which must be very genuine, it must come from our own realization of health, from a deep state of consciousness, where we're actually motivated to give, to invite, to support, to encourage others more than we are to earn money or grow programs or do things that bring credit to ourselves. And I know that, for example, Judy, when you went to Ireland, that's very exciting to do, but it also is something that takes a tremendous amount of thinking and planning and working to accommodate it, to make it happen. And that in part is possible, not because of what you were paid, but because of what you knew you wanted to give. And it's not so much that we give a thing, it's that we go in a state of service. And it's only from being in that state of service, that state of mind, that we actually can provide something that is valuable and useful to others. I used to think that being in a state of service meant that I did a particular thing. And now I understand being in a state of service as being in a state of mind, at being in a level of understanding that is, and I don't want to be self-aggrandizing about this, but I think you all know that in order to be in a state of service, we have to be out of ourselves. It's not about us. It's about, as my family used to say, just doing the right thing. And you know to do that, and you offer it up without very much hesitation. And I began to think, who had written what about that? And there's very little that's actually been printed in the principles literature with the word state of service. And I went searching for something that I hadn't seen for 15 years, and my house is full of a lot of things. So a few days ago, I'm trying to figure out which box is this in, which drawer, and I just knew that it was Chip Chipman, and I probably hadn't seen it for 15 years. Well, here's the little piece. I found it about 3 rooms away from this computer. And at that time, I think Chip was doing a lot of work from the perspective of the business world and probably going into jails. Other of you can verify that. But there's one statement in here that I thought I would share with you kind of as an introduction. And he said this, that the state of service is an actual, tangible, definable state of mind. It is a shift in our perception, a shift in the vantage place from which we view our professional or personal relationships. And in some ways, I think that experience of the state of service is associated, perhaps, with the highest, or if you want to say, the deepest levels of consciousness that we can experience when it comes from that place where we are way beyond our personal thinking and we are way beyond making a decision to do a particular thing. We're in a place where I think I want to say the need or the opportunity becomes apparent. It's just there. It's given to us to see. And then we can respond to that in a way that also comes from that place of wisdom. And in the early days, when I first read Roger and Elsie's old, now out of print book called The Wisdom Within, I would get to that last chapter, and it talked about a societal vision of what could happen if you had the understanding of the principles. And I often closed the book before I got very far into that chapter. And the other day I went back to look at that, and now it makes a bit more sense when I read just these few lines. Not only is such a change in the level of healthy, cooperative functioning possible in society, the route that goes through wisdom is the only way to get there in a sustained and lasting way. And I'd invite you to think a little bit about that. What has that meant for you when you know that you have made decisions to let go of something that you were working at effortfully and begin to offer what you just know is the thing to offer or do or become engaged in? What has your level of wisdom really been, or your contact with that part of yourself? And in a short time, I'm going to ask you to think about your own stories of being in service, not in a way to draw attention or seek praise, but for us to begin to understand what really is necessary if we want to see the world change with an understanding of the principles being disseminated. How does that depend on us living in a state of service or even knowing when we're there? So I'll ask you to begin to share with the entire group what your own experience has been with a state of service mind and what that has caused to happen for you. I was also keenly aware of specific individuals who had done some amazing things over the years. And I happened to think about, for example, Dave Nichols at the Center for Sustainable Change. And I asked him if he could write just a little bit of something since he couldn't be on the call today. And I thought you might be interested in this because he had a nice way of saying something that I think is important. And some of you will remember that he and his wife moved to a particular neighborhood, a very needy, disadvantaged neighborhood in North Carolina. And they thought that moving there would allow them to fix problems that they physically saw in that community. And he said in his note to me that, and I'm reading this now, it was only after I began to understand the principles that I realized our definition of being in a state of service had been that the neighborhood was a very bad place and needed a lot of fixing. We were really in service to the problems. And then he goes on to talk about how 10 years later, he began to see things about being in service in a different way. And he said, as we learned the principles, we experienced the power of living in a state of service. We were in service to the people, not to the problems. And the people changed the problems themselves. That closeness of one human spirit to another, I think, is what he's talking about. And the only way we get to that, in my experience, is when we really have cleared out the concerns for ourselves and just touched what is formless and wise in us, and that directs us to that place where service is natural. And in a little bit, I'm going to put you all on the spot and ask you to start sharing with each other about your experiences of service, or your perspective on it. But there was one more that I wanted to share with you. I had thought of Clytie Mills, if for no other reason than she is so frequently on Facebook and other internet outlets putting out kind words to other people all the time. You never see Clytie in an argument. You always see her supporting, encouraging, thanking people. And I like that model. I'd like to be known in that way if I were Clytie. And so I asked her to write something. She had an appointment today. And I asked her some very specific questions, but mostly I wanted to know what she thought was the most important examples of people being in service that she had observed. And she wrote like this. She said, I feel the quote here best describes the blessing of service. You see, she sees being in service as a blessing. I am describing my caregiving experience with Roger during the last years of his life. The best example of Roger's state of service was in his death. He made caregiving for me easy. An example was that my daughter, who had returned from New Zealand to be with us, was helping Roger drink with a straw and accidentally spilt water on him. She apologized, and Roger, who she thought was not completely conscious, surprised her by saying, "Don't worry, Barbara, it's okay." Very simple, very genuine, very natural kinds of things. She also, for those of you from Salt Spring, was extremely touched, as she said. Dear friends of hers and Roger's traveled from BC to be at Roger's memorial service and spend time with her after for a few days. And she talked about that just being a real service to her. And sometimes people do things like that and don't necessarily realize how impactful they are. So with that, I'm going to ask you, and Brad, if you would unmute mics as you need to, or people raise your hands if that's easier. And I might finger you because I know that you have a lifetime of experiences seeing the principles in action. And this is not about you. If you share a story where you have been in service, it is truly a story of the principles being in service to other people, because that's how we get there. But I encourage you to just share those stories with each other for a few minutes, and I can be pretty quiet for a little while here.
Okay, so if you click on the participants window, and then get another window up, and you can raise your hand. So anybody who would like to speak, please let me know. Okay, I have a raised hand from... Okay, have I muted you?
Okay, hi. I'd like to share a little bit about how it came to me to be in service in a really natural, unknowing way. What happened was, way back in the early days when we met Sid and we started listening to him, we experienced our own lives in a different way, with deeper enjoyment, happiness, more clarity. And when I went back to work after a summer off, the level of engagement with my students, the level of service was naturally higher, except I didn't realize it until the results came back. So it was really going in with an open heart and seeing what was in front of me, but all of a sudden having a different set of eyes to look at the situation. So there weren't the limitations I saw before in how to help somebody or how to work with somebody. It was just a natural growth from being in touch with the three principles, from learning some very little truth. You know, at the beginning, we hardly knew anything, and the impact was so profound. So, and then over the years, you know, we're in and out of it, right? You know, sometimes understanding more and being able to be in deeper service. A continued journey of learning how to be in service, and I'm still learning how. So that's what I want to say.
I have a question. At the time, did it occur to you when you were experiencing change in your own personal life just by hearing the first messages from Sid, did it occur to you then or even later that the way you were changed and functioning with the young children was actually something you would have named being in service? Being in a state of service?
It didn't occur to me until after. Quite often I find that the understanding comes after the fact, because you reflect on what has taken place and you go, oh, that's where it came from. That's what it was. It's just living really, Sid really taught us to live an ordinary life and not to be special and not to seek anything out there. It's just to go and be ordinary, which was really different from how I had expected to enjoy my life. I didn't think it would be in the day-to-day going in and doing whatever you do, but experiencing it in a completely deeper way.
So it caught you off guard.
You bet. Yes.
You know what happened to me? I mean, it's just like goofy. I had been attending these trainings with Roger and some others at a distance, and then returning to the university to do my federally grant-funded work. And I had a small staff of people that I would see on a fairly regular daily basis. And partway into that process, one of the women, a dear friend, Blackfoot, said very directly, kind of slapped her hand down on the table, and she said, "Now what has happened to you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I had no clue what she was even talking about. She's very forward. And she said, "Well, you're nicer to us now." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" She said, "Oh, you're not so bossy." And it just sneaked up, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like to think those very ordinary things are actually the signs that our wisdom is waking up and we are functioning with a new set of, I want to say belts. I'm thinking of lawnmower belts, that kind of thing. I've got something new driving me, and it's just there. But I didn't know that I was really being different. I was still walking around in my same body, doing my same work. And the change was so subtle, but so profound that she could describe it that way. You know, I love your example, Marika. Thank you. I see Judy's hand going up.
Judy, did you say?
You have to unmute her.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've unmuted Judy.
Okay, thank you. I'm always uncomfortable sharing anything about myself, but what I was reminded, and so I'm not going to, but I was reminded of something that Sid did, which some of you, I don't even remember who all was at this conference, but we had a conference with Sid in Minneapolis and quite a long time ago, and I'm sure there are people on this call who may have been there, and I hope my recollection is accurate. And it was in a auditorium, and there were maybe close to 300 people there, and Sid was up on stage, and we were all in the audience. And at one point, we broke for lunch, and as I recall, I went to lunch with Sid and George and Roger and some other people, and as we were coming back to the hotel, there was it was quite a chilly day and very windy, and there was an older homeless man outside the doors of the hotel trying to sort of take shelter in the entryway where he could get away from the wind. And to be honest with you, we were walking past him, and Sid stopped and said, so sir, do you have plans this afternoon? And how respectful is that? You know, this guy is clearly a homeless person seeking shelter. And Sid said, do you have plans this afternoon? And the man said, no, sir, no. And Sid said, well, won't you join us? We're meeting inside here, and I'd like you to just come with us and sit with us in the auditorium, because maybe some of what we're sharing you would find helpful. And so I think the man, more to get out of the cold than any other reason, said sure, and he followed us in, and then Sid made certain that we found a good seat for him. And I think it started to dawn on him that all these people looked pretty professional, and they probably had paid money to be there, and it was making him a little uncomfortable. So Sid actually then walks onto the stage, and the guy's getting really nervous, and Sid welcomes him. He says, well, we have a new guest. And he said, sir, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Would you share your name? And the guy did share his name, and Sid said, please welcome him. And so people, you know, clapped and welcomed him a little, and he stayed for the remainder of the day. And towards the end of the day, he stood up and he asked Sid if he could say something. I hope I can get through this. And Sid said, certainly, you know, what would you like to share? And he said something to the effect of, he'd been alone on the street for a long time, and no one had ever really been very kind to him, that he had a lot of mental health problems. And he had suffered a great deal from his own thinking. And what he said, I'm not certain I really understand what you're talking about, but I just feel like something's changed for me today, just sitting here. And it was so powerful. Just that gentle act of kindness, Sid seeing something that we were truthfully not even aware of. You know how you get talking and you walk right past people? But Sid saw that this man was in need and sad, and he answered that in the most kind way possible. Helped him to feel included, and then of course it was so touching when he shared what had happened for him. And to me, that was like that's become like a benchmark for me for what it means to be in service to other people. That's it.
Oh, Judy, thank you. I've not heard that beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it and allowing us to see you feel it one more time too.
I don't, yeah, I'm sorry, but
No, there's no sorry. You know, my friend had called me to task about what had changed, also taught me in her native way. She said, you know, tears are healing waters.
Yeah, they are.
It's always, it means we've reached something important. So thank you very much. I do know that one or two of you do have to leave early today. So, and I'm hoping if you are in that category that you will make sure that you raise your hand if you have a comment. I won't put you on the spot, but I will invite that. And Krista, did I see your hand begin to go up? Can you unmute her, Brett?
Yeah, meet Krista. Okay. Hello, Krista.
Yes.
Hey, thanks, Judy. That was beautiful to hear how Sid welcomed that individual. And I have to say, it's because of Sid's inclusive nature that I was lucky enough to learn what I did from him. I'm like you, so touched by the way he really saw us all as, you know, having the wisdom and being equal. It was really powerful. I did want to say that as a young woman, decades ago now, when I was, you know, in university learning to be a public school teacher, I really had a very strong desire to be in service. And I was a pretty good student, and I was picking up the skills and techniques that were being offered, and had a certain charisma being a young woman. But it definitely was just that wanting it was not enough. And it was so disheartening to me that I couldn't find a way to be in service to the children who were really faced with challenges, who were frozen or withdrawn or acting out. It bothered me so much that I thought, I'm not in the right profession. I should consider something else to do. And I was just giving, you know, this education thing one last time when just before my longer practicum, my then friend, now husband, Bob, came and shared with me what he'd learned from Sid Banks at Sid's first public talk here on Salt Spring Island. And from hearing a couple of things that I remember clearly is thought creates reality and happiness comes from within. For whatever reason, it just rang so true, and I was a happy person, but I became really deeply happy. And it was like I found something for myself is what happened. And I felt differently. And just from that day on, I felt differently. And what happened when I started my practicum was that all of a sudden it became clear through the 6-8 weeks I was there that all of a sudden I was a specialist in that area. And the professors remarked on it and graded me on that. And I'm like, and you know, it's only with thinking back, like, well, what happened? I couldn't do it. I was ready to give up. And now all of a sudden it happens so easily. Now, so I think when you find something for yourself, then you kind of forget yourself, and then you can be in that state of service and see beautiful things happening. So that's what I wanted to say, is that it really, no matter how much the intellect wants it, it really does come through, it really does start with a feeling, and how fortunate we are.
Thank you very much. Did I hear another voice? Barb, would you unmute for Brett?
Hello, Bob.
Hi, Brett. Hi, everybody. I was thinking back as Krista was speaking about, before I heard Sid, I was working with kindergarten-aged kids, and I would see their problems, and I've forgotten this kid for the last 40 years until just today. And he told me he was going to chop me up with his mom's frozen food knife and put me in the freezer. And I tried to figure out, how am I going to solve this kid's problems? What am I going to do? And got caught up in the drama of all of it. And then along came Sid into my life, and I heard, it wasn't him at first. It was the people around him that I went and met with. And I thought, wow, there's something here. I had no clue what was going on. Not The words they said didn't make any sense, but something touched me really deeply inside. And I noticed myself laughing out loud often. And that wasn't something that I did a lot. And then gradually, I got softer. And when I was with the children, it changed. And it wasn't that I went in thinking something different. I guess I did at some level, but I wasn't going in with a plan. I didn't go in with a goal that I was going to solve this problem or help this kid solve a problem. It was more living in the present moment with that wonderful feeling, and then taking whatever presented itself and working with it. And it changed everything. And like Krista said, it seemed to come from changing inside, and then everything around changed. And I recall when, after I'd been working at a school on Salt Spring for a year, the principal said, and they used to call us Sydney bankers, and he said, I love Sydney bankers working in my school because they're in service 150%. And I've never forgotten that it was, we didn't set out to do it. It just was part of who we became and what we continue to do in life. And Sid gave us such a gift. We're so fortunate.
It became
and like Judy was saying, the things that he modeled in just how he lived his life. When I can remember going for dinner to the Chinese restaurant at Christmas time, and we would all sit at the big table, and he would bring out all his little envelopes, and he'd have gifts for everybody that worked in the place. And it seemed like he had this endless supply of love that he just poured out to people everywhere that he went. And people loved him in return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a huge shift from being focused on how can I experience a happier day, not having too much thinking in my mind, getting rid of my stress. That's one concern that people have. And to switch to this other that you describe, which is really being tuned into, in a natural way, the homeless person in front of you or the situation that, if just tweaked a little bit, could make something more happen at a societal level. It's not always about changing things at the individual's level. We can certainly do that, and that's wonderful. But the ideas that come to us from that place of wisdom, from that deep, really deep place that is not bound by personal thinking, anything is possible. And it plays out in these stories that you're offering up. That's what I hope one day we will see more and more and more of, as the global dissemination of the teaching of the principles gets even more visible and powerful and strong. I see others that I would love to hear from. A person or two on the spot. Do we have any hands going up yet?
Okay, so who did you want unmuted?
Well, I am going to suggest, you're the one, Diane. I was just going to say you. Unmute Diane McMillan from Kansas.
Okay, hello Diana. Oh, Diane, sorry.
Diane, I'm going to ask you to just give a little thumbnail of the work you have done for many years so that people have a clue where you have flown in from today. Is she unmuted?
Oh, I can't hear Diane, but she is unmuted. Okay. It might be a case of the volume needs to go up from.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, now I can't even hear you. What have I done? Does that work?
We're hearing you.
Oh, yay. I can hear you too.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm so happy to be invited. I live in outside of Lawrence, Kansas. I teach at a university and blessed 36 years now at that university. But the last 12 years, really sharing from my 3 principles base. And just like several of the rest of you have already said, it totally changes how it is that you move in our work with people. I never thought about it till you asked me to join you about this being in a state of service, like so overtly thinking about it that way, but it's exactly what it is. And, you know, I used to, because I've been doing social work and teaching in human services for a long time, like always tell my students that the most important way to connect with people is to get away from this idea of the roles that we hold, and that we don't connect with people role to role, but we connect with people soul to soul. But I don't think I really knew what I was saying until I got grounded in the 3 principles. And that idea of, like, it doesn't matter like what my position is, or, you know, that I have the authority in the classroom as the professor. It's the connection of these beings, these beautiful, thoughtful, unlimited potential. And even when they're struggling and they're creating some discord for you, like was it Barb who said someone was going to chop her up, put her in the freezer? I mean, that kind of, you know, pretty will get your attention, but you don't, like, you see past those words into what it is that they're really struggling with. And the whole climate changes. Like it's like the most richest soil for people to find themselves in. It's not what I have to offer. It's more what I get to pull out of them. So it's remarkable how it changes the whole teaching experience. It's just remarkable.
Would you share just a couple of pieces of information about the community projects that you and your students have made happen?
Oh, yeah.
Far beyond being in the classroom.
Yeah. I've been so lucky that way because, you know, everybody, like, they resonate with the truth of this. And so when you start dealing with your students and talking to people and describing the potential, like, as individuals change, then their relationships with their little smaller community, family group, sorority, whatever it may be, changes. People really started to feel that. And I had been connected on several projects in the community. I did quite a bit of work in the public housing, and I brought students in. We did every other week, we did groups with residents of public housing. We did training with the people that work there. You know, I think in some ways, I'll say this carefully, because I think the health and the sort of the wherewithal that the residents of public housing began to get as they listened to students and interacted with students, not me, but the students, they started to want more things and they started to demand more things. Like, let's don't wait just till a certain date, like July 1, for the air conditioning to be turned on in our low-income housing, high-rises. It's too hot. Like, we want the air conditioning turned on when it's hot and not a certain date. And I think as they began to get more organized about that, they're human beings and they have rights and they want activities for their kids, we caused some you know, like some desire, some demanding for change, which was interesting because then we lost our funding to work in the public housing project. And we've also done work in community corrections. We've had a real opportunity to work with the officers and do regular trainings with them. I've also gone in, my students and I have gone into several agencies, like one that worked with people who are differently abled and did a lot of training with the staff. They've been having lots of difficulty with the residents being I mean, maybe what you would think of as mistreated, but they were certainly misunderstood, and they were not embraced for their uniqueness. And having the staff go through the 3 principles training really changed that they saw beauty in their residents, and not behavior to be managed, but behavior to be understood for the message that the people were trying to share. I have lots of other stories, but I know I'm talking too much, but yeah.
One of the most important things I think that Diane has been able to do is that in that university teaching role, and of course she learned the principles and lives the principles, in that teaching role, she has been literally for, I almost want to say, decades now, teaching folks who go out as professionals in various forms of social work and social services. So she's been, in a sense, behind the scenes producing the next generation of the professionals, which is what we all dream of. You know, could we have that happen in all professions? She also has one of the longest vitas that I have run into. She's a speaker at conferences far beyond the 3 principles community, and we have to have someone doing that in order to change the world. So her professional life is a real life of service. And thank you for making time while you were traveling to get all hooked up technologically. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else that
Thank you.
would like to raise their hand? I have someone in mind I will call on, but please, these are marvelous stories.
Okay, I have a couple of raised hands, one from Michelle and one from Chettle. So shall we begin with Michelle?
Yes, the universe takes care of us. She was who I was going to call next. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Kathy.
Lovely to see you.
Oh, I've got quite a few things actually. But what most comes to mind for me, I was going to talk about the privilege of caring. I think you're aware that I've cared for my son throughout his life.
And he is how many years now?
He's 25 years old now.
Yes.
And still, absolutely, you know, the joy connection with him is very profound. But yeah, I wanted to go beyond that really, and to say that in reflecting on love the other day, I could see that as long as I felt a hole in me, which just used to be in my chest area all the time, a very profound hole, that it was only when that became whole with a W that I was then able to be responsive and to be responsible rather than in survival mode, really. And what it really brings, so I think that's in every relationship we have, whether that's someone we meet in a shop or a store, as you would call it, or somebody we're in an intimate relationship with, or parents, anybody really, professionals. If we feel a hole, to me, then we're taking. We need this hole filling with something. And so we try to take that from the outside, and it really doesn't matter where that comes from, in what form or substance or person or dress or anything else. We're just trying to fill this hole, but from the wrong direction. And what I experience is when that fills up and becomes whole with a W, we're then able, in a free flow, to contribute to other people's lives. The lives of the life of a flower, the life of a person, anything. We're just able to contribute. But then it becomes, to me, what is that contribution? And so that contribution is the very essence of life. Mm-hmm. But we cannot give that away as long as we feel that we are not whole. And I will add from that, you know, it's not a there's an awareness of that, there's an experience of that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people can be there 100% of the time. And I think just being genuine about that and seeing where you are in the moment. And if you say to someone you love them, but you're not whole with a W at that time, forget it. People know. They know.
Yeah.
They know. If you're preparing a meal and you're not whole with a W at the time, forget it. It's going to be rubbish. And it's like you contaminate the things around you. So just leave it until you feel whole again in yourself.
Oh, I love that metaphor, analogy that you're talking about. If only our government could understand what you're saying when we talk about the whole child initiative. Here, so much of our legislation is about providing for the whole child, and you're talking about it in a way that is internal, which of course is not understood here enough yet. We hope one day it will be. If I were to ask you just a simple question, look back a year and talk about, if you're comfortable, the wholeness that you are experiencing today. I see a beautifully happy, present, engaging person today. This is lovely.
Well, I would say the difference is that most of the time, I would say at least 98% of the day, I'm aware of being what I would call the cross in the middle of the infinity sign. And the cross to me is awareness. And from that space of awareness, I can see when I'm caught up in thinking and stories. And most of the time, then they're just really distant, like they're held out as a third person and they're just not me. And that's a huge benefit to see and experience that. But also from that space of awareness, I can feel the wholeness.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. It's just a beautiful experience.
And you're in service 24/7. I know that. Thank you very much. Lovely. Feel free to ask each other questions, folks, as we go along here. Lori, I notice you smiling a lot as Michelle is talking. Is something going through your head? You choose to share a bit with us. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Well, no, I was just thinking how incredibly deep and insightful she is, and don't call on me next.
You want to tell her what your work is?
Well, I'm an elementary principal. I'm also currently the school district's lead person on our Resilience Health Realization Initiative. And when you were asking us to talk about service, I guess I'm trying to navigate that this school year, trying to figure out how to be of service both at a district level and an elementary school level in my duties as a principal. And what I've become more aware of is how important it is to set the intention each day of being in a state of service, and then trusting that as I navigate through my day, that I'm going to be present enough to know how to be of service to that person or in that moment. I joke with some of my close friends that I'm a recovering fixer. That was a lot of how I grew up, as the mother child in my home and the fixer in my early professional career. And what I've learned through my resilience and health realization studies and growth is that that's a pretty arrogant way of going through life, assuming that I've got the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise to fix other people. And that my job really is to get out of their way and be in a state of service about how I can help them navigate their own lives better.
Thank you. She's got a big job with lots of kids in and out every day. Lots to be done. Thank you. Another person ready to speak, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm going to unmute Pietro now. Rosie.
Which person are you unmuting?
There he is. Okay. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
Okay, yeah. I just love to come on this seminar or webinar and then just listen to all of you lovely people. You know, it's just, I just blew my nose just because I was starting to cry just a few seconds ago. And I, you know, I've been into the principles for a little bit more than 2 years now, and I've been working as a coach the last 10 years. And I was in Salt Spring now in June, and it was called Being in Service from the Inside Out, this special 4-day seminar there. And you know, trying to build my business as a coach has been challenging, you know, trying to listen to different experts and you know, taking their advice over my own wisdom, you know, and now doing it the opposite way, you know, listening to myself and doing what's obvious and doing what's next, you know, and doing what inspires me. And what I realized, you know, this summer was just, I want to meet people. I want to be in service with them and just meet them and see if I can help them and just see what happens. No expectations. Yeah. And so that's what I've done for, you know, a little bit more than 2 months now. And I didn't know what to expect because I didn't, you know, I want my business to build in some ways, but when I'm in those meetings, I'm just there and seeing what happens. And I'm surprised, you know, that how many things have been created from nothing. You know, and because I used to be a salesperson for many years, and I used to be a person with an agenda and you know, not listening and not, you know, wanting to care about people, but not really caring about people, not understanding that in myself. And now that I've kind of, when I meet up in a state of, you know, neutral listening and really deeply listening to people, and you know, I was it Diane who said, you know, connecting soul to soul, and just that connection, you know, just really seeing people and seeing that we're one. In that feeling of love and understanding, you know, things have just created itself, it seems like. You know, it's not like the business has taken off in wild ways, not like that, but just, you know, I'm just creating relationships with some people, and other people want me to speak or coach them, or it just happens. Things happen, and I just love to see that, you know, I can just really live my life in this way, in a way of service, and it feels like I'm just scratching the surface of that, you know, because sometimes I don't feel like I'm in that feeling of service, but other times I really can connect with that feeling, and that's, I guess, you know, one of the best feelings in the world. Just, And to me, it's where I'm at this level. It's so much about listening and listening much more and listening from a neutral state, not judging, not expecting, just being with people. And I didn't realize how powerful that was. And I guess like I said, I'm just scratching the surface of that power. So I just wanted to share that.
First of all, I want to thank you so much for coming into the conversation and saying things just the way you did. It was very beautiful, very encouraging, because what I hear in your story is that in these last 2 months, you are finding something deep inside of yourself that you can trust to guide you as you go forward. And you do have a goal of having a successful coaching business, but it sounds to me like the priority right now is being in that place of wisdom and service, and the outcomes of the business aren't quite as gripping.
Yeah.
Letting go of that just a little bit. And, frequently the words that we associate with that situation that probably most people on the call have been in at one time or another is that we're learning to trust the unknown, that there's something more than our personal thinking that will get us from point A to point B. And I'm just really impressed. I'm going to ask if there's anyone on the call that might like to chat with, how do you say your name, Kittel?
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's a Norwegian name, so it's common in Norway, but not nowhere else.
Oh, I have a little bit of Norwegian heritage, so I should learn. Tell me how to say it in Norwegian.
Kjetil.
Oh, I'll have to talk to you privately. Thank you. Anyone wish to further the conversation with him a little bit?
Yeah, there's Tally. I'll go to unmute her now. Tally?
Hi everyone. Sorry I haven't got my camera on. I'm sitting here with rollers in my hair, so I don't want to entertain you. I'm in kind of a funny place with it all now at the moment, and I thought listening to this webinar might help me, and it has hugely so far. So thank you everyone. So I'm just finishing the One Thought Institute, and I've been playing with the idea of becoming a coach for about 2-3 years before, and nothing had really spoken to me in terms of the different approaches and the different trainings I could do. And I realized I didn't have to do a training, but I wanted something as a catalyst because I wanted to change career. And I realized all my wanting, I've been putting all that wanting on top of it, and it's all thinking. And I'm just kind of at this point where I'm starting to explore different things I can do, and then money's getting in the way. And so I feel like I'm taking a step forward and a step back. So I can really identify with what you said there. And it kind of resonates with me in terms of what's been keeping me stuck over the last couple of weeks. And I actually, I've come from a business background, so I've worked in human resources for like 12 years now. And I've kind of taken some time out to explore, and I've realized that exploring is just going to be hanging out with like the people that I might want to work with in different environments, having different conversations and going to some networking meetings. And, you know, I really want to take this into kind of like, I'm going to do some work with Jacqueline Hollows, hopefully, from a prison point of view, but really into an environment where people are not considered contributory citizens, if that makes sense. And part of me, you know, I live in London and I have a mortgage, and I feel like that's prodding on me because I, you know, have to have a certain level of income and all that. But my thinking around all of that at the moment is changing, even down to do I really need to live in London? you know, so it's really, really just helpful just listening to everyone. And I'd love to connect with you after to kind of continue the conversation.
Excellent. And there is a way to connect with each other. And Brett, I believe the best way is for people to contact you, and then you can get permission from the other person. So you send Brett an email if you want to follow up. A couple things occurred to me as you were speaking. First, I know that there are others in this group that are doing coaching, so it may be helpful for some of you to comment about that. The second thing is that as I, years ago, started teaching the principles in, I'm going to say, school communities, it was very common for people to come up during or after the trainings and saying, how can I do what you're doing? I want to, you know, I want a different career. And my response always was, this is not about getting into the business of teaching the principles and being dependent on that for your income. In the case of educators, you can live the principles and infuse the principles in the job that you already have. Your job is taken care of. It's a question of how will you live and be in that job. It's sort of what Marika was talking about before. She was in a job. She began to learn the principles, and then it just infused into that. Now, I'm not saying not to go into coaching, but what I was trying to save people from when they would ask me that question was the misery that would come if they quit their teaching job too soon and then hung out a shingle and started to say, I'm a consultant. And that was 25 years ago. That's different than how it is today. But there is something to be said about making sure that one is living the principles. And as our gentleman from Norway, and I'm not going to try to say your name, I'll take Kiddo, but that's wrong. As he said, this part about easing into what you really know and live about the principles and letting that be the dominant goal or hope that you have, and trusting that the employment piece or the consulting piece will flow. If those two things are in the opposite order, I don't see a way that it can work very well without a tremendous amount of stress and pressure. Can one go out and create business? Yes. Certainly, there are all kinds of businesses that individuals have gone and created in this world. The question is, can you hold on to your own understanding of the principles and do that business creation from that place, perhaps? And I'm not sure if I can put someone on the spot here, but Mary, could I ask you to chat about this issue just a little bit? Because I know you have a history of doing some coaching and other things, and
yeah,
appreciate your perspective.
Sure. Let's see.
You're on. You're good.
Am I on? Oh, I don't have to raise my hand.
You don't have to do anything. We can.
Oh, okay. All right. I have to get rid of this little thing then so I can see you there.
Oh.
Well, you know, as this has been going on, Kathy, I've been lots of ideas to talk about have been coming up, but you know, when I came into the field of mental health, and I guess coaching too, because before I was licensed, that's what I was doing, because I was a consumer or a client of mental health services in the three principles. And when the light went on for me about this, and I had my first, I would call it an awakening, because it was, you know, things changed so dramatically for me that as time went on, I realized this is what I felt like I was called to a state of service about this. I felt like I've been touched so deeply by this, I have to tell people about this. And I looked across at my mentor and I thought, I want to do what she's doing. So I just kept listening to that. And little by little, I went back to school, went to graduate school for psychology, and jumped all the hoops in order to be able to get into the field. And then opportunities just came my way for places to do groups or to work with individuals. I never even had to send out a resume. And a lot of that work was kind of in the trenches work, especially the arms work that I was doing in home with people and in the community who were labeled with serious and persistent mental illness and chemical dependency and in and out of jail and homeless. And in the course of, if I guess to me, the being in service was always just remembering and listening to what I understood to be true about myself and everybody, and that everybody can be well. And just sticking with that and working with anyone that came across came into my caseload. Now, in recent times, because my work has evolved, and I don't do the arms work anymore, and I'm now, I've been in private practice for a while and building that up and trying to do the coaching too. And, there's times when I want to say that, over the years, because I'm single, I'm a homeowner, and I've had, someone had mentioned the mortgage payment and all of that, and that's been a concern for me throughout the years. And anytime I get out of a state of service is when I'm insecure about that thing and thinking about that sort of, my security. And the times when every time I would remember, just quiet down and listen to wisdom and remember what you're doing. Remember the work you're doing. That's really where the richness is anyway, is in the work itself and in the connection with others, those soul connections, and seeing the transformations in people, which is, it's beyond, any paycheck could ever be. And the funny thing is that every time I would shift back into that trusting the unknown, back into wisdom, and just, remembering about what the work was about, a new opportunity would come my way, or an idea would pop up for something to bring in some new work. So I've never wanted in these years. And I just think that that's a good thing to keep in mind, that we can get into insecure thinking about where we want to go in terms of our lifestyle or in terms of our career. And then you just remember this is really about the work itself. And those things will fall into place if you stay in that state of service. Mm-hmm. So hopefully, I feel like I've meandered a bit, but hopefully that makes sense. So.
Thank you. That's a wonderful response, Mary. As I've stood at a distance and watched Mary, the years of education that she had to endure to get the credentials, the approval to provide insurance reimbursable services for teaching the principals to mental health clients. There have been some huge obstacles, and she's basically not lost heart in that very long process. What makes a difference when I look from a distance? One thing that's been true, Mary, it seems to you've always had your priorities straight. About, I don't mean this as a judgment. I just mean I stand back and I marvel and I say, you've always had it right, that the service to the people you're with is first.
Yeah.
And you don't, quote, sell out to be able to get a paycheck for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And as you say, you have not been unable to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
Diane, yes. Can you unmute Diane?
Diane is unmuted.
Thank you. I I'm just so moved by so much of what I've heard today. So I think that's the comment that this comes from, because, you know, this whole idea, we've used the word trust several times, and, you know, I think that what I hear many of you saying is that even though we're deeply grounded in this understanding, and it really does just like radiate from us, it doesn't mean we never get insecure, or we never, you know, have, like, not even just in our work and our future, but even in our relationships with our loved ones. And that seems for some reason so important to say right now, that the thing that changes is, like, we know deeply, it's just being caught up in thinking. But I don't know that no matter how many years and how many, or how much deeper I feel like I just get to be, that I'm still just this human being who either experiences grief deeply because I lose another girlfriend to cancer, or, you know, gets crosswise in worry about a health issue with my husband, and then I feel like I never learned this at all. You know, I have this little moment of like, what's happening? And then I just laugh, because, you know, it's just being human. And so for those of you that are taking these big risks, like Tali and Chital, I hope I got that close. Like, take those risks and know that you'll have moments of real angst about them, but so what? You know, that's just part of it. Because, like, you just have that resonance in you, even when you cover it all up with being scared. So that's what just occurred to me. So thanks.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I see at least 3 or 4 of you who have not had an opportunity yet to speak, and I certainly can call on people, and I will. We have about 10 minutes left. I know there's some real gems sitting out there, so I'll give you an opportunity first to raise your hand and offer whatever comes to mind. Brett, you get to speak.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
He doesn't usually do this. Okay.
Okay, I remember a time when I was just going about for a walk, getting to wherever I wanted to go, and I met another lady who was pushing a buggy with a baby inside it, right? And we came up to a point where there were some steps ahead of us, so it would have been quite difficult for the lady by herself with a buggy with a baby in it to transport the buggy down to the bottom part. And it just occurred to me in that moment to give her a hand. So, okay, I got in front of the buggy, lifted the front while she lifted it from the back end, and we got down. And when we got to the bottom, she said to me, "Thank you so much." Right? And you could really see that she was in a feeling, and I didn't quite understand that part. Right? So, seeing that what I had done was now finished, I turned away and then went about my normal business. And in that moment, I was so embarrassed. And I couldn't understand why I was embarrassed, but I was embarrassed. Right? I saw that I went above my usual level, per se. Right? And then it wasn't until another person, some years later, that when I explained that story to him, he said that it wasn't that I went above my level, it was that I saw a glimpse of who I really was.
Oh, beautiful.
And that just blew my mind.
Yeah. That's what we dream of for all people, that they can have a chance to glimpse who they really are. And when that occurs, get out of the way, because amazing things follow. Look what you're doing today. The big buggy you're pulling. Thank you. Great story. Another person that might like to add a comment here?
No.
Okay, we have a person here and I can't see her name. She's waving. Can you?
Yes, Birdie. Going to unmute Birdie now. Hello, Birdie.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been very, very interesting. And I'm not quite sure what I have to say. I loved what Diane has said, and Mary, and also Kettle. And I've found exactly what he's been finding. The more I've tried to build a coaching practice and go out and set it up and place my clients, is what's really happening. And once I just relax and just connected with people and, you know, spoke heart to heart with them. It's all beginning to fall into place really beautifully. One of the things that happened to me that I was astounded by, I was called to see someone who'd seen psychiatrist and mental health team, and she was extremely distressed. And anyway, I just sat and talked to her for about half an hour, and she was suicidal. The light had gone from her eyes. She'd totally gone, because what had happened, she'd been on a court case, and she'd lost custody of her grandchild, and the daughter had lost custody of the grandchild, and she'd never see this grandchild again. She was banned from seeing them, and she hadn't done anything. It was all a pack of lies, but it just blew her out. And so I sat and talked to her for half an hour, and she didn't want anything to do with spirituality or the work that she'd been doing before, or any of the people that she knew. She was finished. She was gone. And then all of a sudden she came back and she said, oh, and she went out to help someone else who was in trouble across the road. Oh, it's amazing. So, yeah. But, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
The thing that's been so amazing for me, the last 2 weeks I've been diagnosed with cancer. And this has been such a journey, but when I went in, I was told the first time that I didn't have cancer, and then they did some more biopsies. They confirmed that it is, and I have to have an operation. And I went alone on the second visit, thinking I was just going to say, oh, you're okay, you can go away now. And it wasn't to be. And but the consultant and the nurse who were with me, they were crying and trying to explain to me what was happening. And I was really placid, I was very serene, and I wasn't sort of perturbed by it at all. And I was just asking them lots of questions. And they said, well, why aren't you responding? What do you understand what we're saying? Are you okay? Do you have anyone with you? And I said, no, I don't. But I do understand what you're saying, and I do know what it means. But I had this picture in my mind, and it was like you have a picture, and 2/3 of the picture I could feel I was in mind. Mind was solid as my base, and I was stood in mind, like I would be stood in concrete, if you like. It was totally solid. And then the bit in the middle, the second third, was sort of blank. But on the top, I had layers and layers of layers of thinking, like Kathy Casey draws the swirls of thinking. And I felt like my head was sort of out there. It was just really weird. But I was okay with it, and I've still been okay. And it took me deep into the principles. I'm literally living the principles at the moment.
Yes.
Every moment. I don't know where I'm going to come out of this, but because I have to find out more of how serious my situation is this coming Wednesday. So, yeah, it's quite a journey, but I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. So, yeah.
Well, my best wishes go to you, and just the comment that we that live with some form of cancer can be very reassured that the understanding we have of the principles is a powerful piece of our continuing health and even healing.
Yeah.
So what you're experiencing now with your grounding in the principles may be among the most valuable tools to fight the disease.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Congratulations on being able to hold on to that now at such an early time. And we wish you the best.
Thank you. Yes, it was interesting because the night after, when I came home and I went to bed that night, and I slept like a baby, there was no stress or anything. But I had this massive download for about 2 hours. I was writing, and I was having all these instructions.
Yes.
And I can't remember all of them, but it was saying, no therapies, this is all nonsense, it's nonsense, it's nonsense. No change in your diet, this is nonsense, this is nonsense, this is nonsense. And then all these guidelines, really. And it was the principles. It was just the principles. And then last night I had the same thing for about half an hour as well. Then I went back to sleep. Yeah. So I feel that I've just been guided totally along the
Yeah,
way.
that being guided is the critical piece, and we know that you'll be able to hold on to that. So again, very best wishes. We have others. I'll give one last little opportunity here for 2 or 3 people to make very brief comments. Gary?
Hello, Gary.
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about just what I've come to understand in the state of service, that it's really, it's what we are hardwired to have, and as a result of who we are, which is really a pure love, the fact that that's at our essence what we really are. And when we experience that, it seems like it just sort of naturally emerges, and it affects the people around us, and people pick up on that. And I just know that as I shut down my personal thinking, that where in that my core is that, and that has really served me well in really crisis situations where I haven't had an answer. I didn't know what to do when I would be doing a home visit with a family in crisis, and it's such a great thing to be able to trust that it will emerge just naturally if I allow it to. And I see it in systems and within our schools. I'm sitting in the same room with Laura Smith and thinking of just a quick story of a father coming to the school saying that his wife had passed away during that day, and could he tell his daughter, with us present at the school, about that horrible event in his life. And he didn't know how to do it, but he trusted the fact that he knew that the people at that school and that Lori as a leader would be able to help him through that crisis situation. So the whole system can be seen as in the state of service as well as the individuals within that system. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, this is the putting of the arms around the world. Even if our world is very small, the being in service is getting out of going like this for myself and going, somewhere out here.
Hi. I recently read Jack Pransky's Paradigm Shift, which I really enjoyed. And it really hit me after I read that book that Sid was actually the master at systems change. Yeah. I mean, we hear from Judy Sedgman how he could honor someone who was homeless and cold outside, a total stranger outside a hotel, yet he also, at the same time, was really cognizant of and very devoted to changing the world and systems change. And I just, it didn't even hit me till I read that book at what he was really up to. So I just wanted to say that it's so interesting how it's this work, it's about individuals finding something from within, finding their inner mental health, but also those of us who like to dream and have a vision of a better world for our children and grandchildren. There's a place for that as well. So it's just kind of exciting to see it and the two-handed approach, so to speak.
And I smile as Krista makes this comment, because we're at the point where we do need to conclude, and you will be probably not surprised that it's almost as if she and I planned this. This is a little bit from The Missing Link, a good place for us to end today. This is on page 133 if you want to jot it down. And Sid simply wrote, "Those who have found a balance between their intelligence and their innate wisdom are the lucky ones. As human beings, we must look closely at the relationship between our spiritual nature and our psychological nature. Here, we will find the answers we seek to change the deplorable state of the world." A little bit further on. "You must exercise your freedom of choice to decide on your own individual path. No matter which path you take, the wisdom you seek will always be found within the depths of your own consciousness. That summarizes where we've been heading all day today. So thank you very much.